Lakewood City Council for Monday, May 10th to order. The first item of business is a review of the 6-year 2022-2027 Transportation Improvement Program. And for this, we have a bevy of people from Public Works, Mr. Busich, Mr. Ott, and Mr. Hill.
Good evening, Mayor Anderson, Deputy Mayor Whalen, members of the City Council. Tonight, we're going to let our new Capital Programs Manager take the lead on the update to the Transportation Improvement Plan. As a reminder, this is an annual occurrence where we have an opportunity to delete projects from our TIP and add projects. We primarily delete projects because we have completed the work. And we add projects when we've identified locations in the city that are in need of transportation work, whether that be road work, curb, gutter, sidewalk, street lights, signals, etc. As a reminder also, this is a planning level document. So the cost estimates you see in here are at a planning level. They are not highly precise, and there are opportunities for those to change in the ensuing years as we learn more information, specifically as we are looking to add projects into the capital expenditure, the 2-year budget. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ted, who's going to lead you through our PowerPoint and help answer any questions. I've also invited Mr. Ott to participate tonight, primarily because he is our historical knowledge and memory and data bank, if you will. And Ted has been with us for, I think, 5 or 6 weeks now, Ted. So if you do need to unmute, and if either Ted or I are unable to answer questions specific to a project, then Weston is lurking in the background to help us out. Thank you, and Ted, take it away.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I actually did not know if I'm supposed to share a screen to present this. Is that how this rolls?
Would you like me to share it?
I can. I just didn't know what the standard operating procedure is.
Unless the city clerk has the ability to bring it up for us, then why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I will. Screen.
There you go.
Start the PowerPoint. Okay.
Start at the top.
Start at the top, not at the end. Yes. That was a wonderful presentation. Any questions? No. Yeah. All right. So tonight, the Transportation Improvement Program. So projects completed or under construction last year and this year. Nice list there. We have 6 projects that are either completed or will be completed soon.
Okay, can you go to this next slide?
Are you not seeing the next slide?
No, we see the first. Go to the full slide presentation.
Hold on, the mouse is not working with me for some reason. Are you seeing page 2 or page 1 still?
Page 1 still. It seems to be stuck.
Okay. Well, I came to the office so I could make sure I had good Wi-Fi. I did not think I was going to have PowerPoint presentation issues. Zoom slideshow is not. Not quite sure what to do here.
Let's just scroll down there a little bit, or just
scroll.
Next page.
There we go. That works. Let's old school it here. I like it.
There you go.
Page 2. Apologize. So 6 projects. 111, 112th is under construction. 100th Street and Lakewood Drive intersections under construction. 108th overlay is under construction. Lakewood Drive is very close to wrapping up and under construction. Veterans Drive is complete, and Onyx Drive, well, besides some punch list items, Onyx Drive is complete as well. Slide. So pictures of the completed projects, Onyx Drive, sidewalks. Very nice day and very nice looking finished product. Veterans Drive, Drive of the Lake to the VA entrance. Also a nice day and nice finished product. 111th, 112th, Bridgeport to Kendrick. Nice day. If you like bare dirt, it's a nice project. It is underway, and The estimated completion date is July of this year. And I would pose that it's probably going to be the end of July based on the current schedule. 100th Street and Lakewood Drive signal. There's minor work happening. It's mostly under suspension, waiting for the poles to be fabricated and delivered. Has an estimated completion date of this year, August. 108th, this is the overlay from Bridgeport to Pacific Highway. This is actually probably a week and a half old photo. They are going gangbusters and actually have, I think, almost all the AD ramps done. So they are definitely going to meet the July of this year completion. Lakewood Drive, Stockham to Fleet Creek. This is also a couple week old photo, and I think they've obviously put in the last lift and buttoning up any miscellaneous punch list items. So that's actually going to be done the end of this month, if not sooner. So projects proposed to be added to this year's TIP, or this 6-year TIP, but added this year are, a lot of them are in the Springbrook area. There's a traffic signal that is down at up at Pacific Highway and Sherindale. Give you a quick map of what that kind of looks like. So the Springbrook area and all the orange are the proposed projects that are the roads. The signal's a little further north, and I did not put that on this map, but you will see it here soon. In no particular order, the added projects. So McCord Drive Southwest, Pacific Highway to Bridgeport. So it'd be minor widening, curb and gutter, associated storm, sidewalk on the city side, bike lanes where we can fit them. We're hoping at least one, if not two. Illumination, obviously you need ADA, and right now our estimate is 1.4 million and some change. Second one up, McCord Drive from Bridgeport to 47th. And I didn't explain earlier, down in this little key map, you can kind of keep track of where you are in the world as we go along. So McCord again from Bridgeport to 47th, minor roadway widening, curb and gutter, storm, sidewalk, illumination, EDA, and $220,000 is our current estimate. Next up, 47th. So basically we did McCord Drive all the way over to 47th. Now we're coming up 47th from McCord Drive to 127th. And basically the same improvements and a $400,000 estimate for that stretch. Next up is Lincoln Avenue. So it kind of goes, would that be southwest to northeast, or vice versa. Roadway widening, curb and gutter, associated storm, illumination, PDA, and we're looking at a $700,000 estimate currently. Chicago Avenue, which is basically crisscrosses there with Lincoln. Minor road widening, curb gutter, storm, sidewalk, illumination, PDA, and we're $740,000 for this year estimate. San Francisco Avenue from Springbrook to True Lane. Again, kind of the same, road widening, curb gutter. I feel like a broken record. Illumination ADA, we're at $440,000 for this year's estimate for that project. Now hopping across Pacific Highway, we have Clover Creek Drive Southwest from Pacific Highway to Hillcrest Drive. This is curb gutter, sidewalk, road widening, illumination. This is would be a tied project to be done with Sound Transit, since we would not be doing any of the improvements within their right of way for the track. And to do our section of this, less Sound Transit, was $360,000. Next up, the traffic signal that didn't make the other map, but Pack Highway in Sherindale, putting in a new traffic signal is roughly $750,000 of an estimate of today's dollars. In summary, nice visual to kind of show you everything. So the blue lines are all the completed or will be completed. And the orange lines, along with the orange dot, signalize the projects that we're proposing for this year's 6-year TIP, or additions to the TIP for this year. You have any questions?
Questions from council?
See
Done.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you. Hey, on the Springbrook additions there, have you spoken to any of the other utilities, mainly the water and the gas guys? Would they be doing work jointly in that area?
Once these projects were to move forward, yes, we would need to coordinate with all franchise utilities to make sure that we're not putting down something that will get torn up shortly thereafter.
Okay, so we don't know that, because I think on the Bridgeport project, when we were in there, the water guys were in there. So, but we don't know that yet.
We don't know. This is still so high level that, yeah, we're not to that stage yet.
So what was the thought process? Because I don't remember us having discussions about redoing most of Springbrook, and they're good projects, I think. But what was the thought process behind just going into this one specific neighborhood and adding these projects in?
If I could tackle that one, I'd like it. Councilmember Boke, there's a couple different reasons. The first off, when you look at where we've been doing projects throughout the city, we tried to also identify areas where we haven't been doing projects that are lower income that would value and benefit from additional improvements to the community. But in addition to that, as you know, we've been talking with Sound Transit about improvements in the community, provide better access to their sounder station. They have a large pot of money, and they're asking us for what projects that we might be able to propose. Looking at where the sounder station is, the work that we want them to do on 47th Street, bringing it up to Springbrook Park, it's a logical extension to go from there out into this community. And we've already been talking to them about projects here that they could co-fund or fund themselves, and they're in their mix. For us to be able to, with a straight face, ask them to fund projects, they need to be on our tip. But regardless of even that, these projects are good projects for the community out there, and it's warranted.
So, yeah, I agree. So you think even after the 47th Street project, that Sound Transit may be interested at some level to continue, so it's all, I'm forgetting the word, contiguous, I guess. Is that what we're on?
That would be our position in the conversations we've been having with them. They have identified $44 million for transit improvement in and around the station. They've stated that there's not enough money to build a multi-story parking garage. So what else do we have? So we laid out a whole series of projects. This is one area that we've been asking them to focus on to evaluate. The Clover Creek crossing, the sounder station, Sound Transit crossing there is another one. We asked them to evaluate 112th Street between Gravel Lake Drive and Bridgeport, curb gutter, sidewalk, bike lanes. We know, as you may recall, the project that Ted showed, which is 111th, 112th Street, that is being funded by Sound Transit. And the other projects are solid projects to bring additional customers to the sounder station, especially folks who may be looking to go up to points north for higher paying jobs, frankly, to bring the money back in, provides more of an opportunity for people to expand their economic base.
Okay, good. I think we could also plug in CDBG dollars. Those would be eligible for use in that area. And maybe if some other federal money comes down on the infrastructure package or something. Okay, good. Thank you.
Ms. Farmer.
In both the projects to be removed and the projects to be added, there's mention of sidewalks, generically sidewalks. And I'm old school. Sidewalks used to be sidewalks, and you didn't ride your bike on the sidewalks. It was like verboten. At least that's the way I grew up. You rode your bike on the road and you took your chances. But now we have some multi-use. I'm going to get the term wrong, Mr. Vucic, but some of our sidewalks, and particularly on Veterans on the one side, it's very large. And I've learned that
Shared
that's
use.
there you go.
Shared use.
Use path. So I'm curious which of these projects that are being added have a shared use path and not a sidewalk, or yes, if that's correct.
So as Ted was indicating on McCord Drive, we're looking to put sidewalk on one side only because the other side is JBLM. There'll never be any access from people living on that side because it's on base and it's all fenced off. And then we're looking to put in bike lanes, 1 or 2 bike lanes, depending upon the width and what we can fit in there. Shared use paths are really good if you're going in a neighborhood where you don't have high traffic. So people are comfortable being out on it. It's not a commute path. McCord Drive will probably be used by commuters to get into JBLM because this drives into JBLM. But primarily, we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. What's the kind of use? What's the funding? In some cases, the funding sources that we get extra points for putting in shared use paths. So we do that, like around Gravy Lake Drive and on Veterans Project. When you look at Washington Boulevard, because that is a part of an identified bike commuter path, we're going to be putting in the 6-foot wide bike lanes on both sides of the road and keeping them, which are commuters going at a higher pace than the bicyclists with the mom and pop and the little kids on their bikes learning how to ride. They're more appropriate for shared use path. We wouldn't want them in the roadway.
Thank you.
Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Ted, I appreciate the comments here. You spoke about the completion date for the Lakewood Drive project that's nearly done, and you had is that completion date of very shortly included re-erecting the fence that was taken down along the east side of that road, or is that more of an after the fact when they're able to do it?
Speaking with the inspector earlier, well, I guess later last week, Monday, he was talking about the fencing was going up. I would assume that's the fencing you're referring to.
Okay, that's good. On the added project, there was the McCord Drive Pacific Highway to Bridgeport. And just to be sure, that's that a portion of that project is actually New York Avenue, and it includes the improvements to the bridge over I-5.
So I think we're going to try to figure out what we can squeeze into that area on the bridge, knowing that bridge is probably WashDOT governed and going to be difficult to convince them to widen it and do any work. So I think we're just going to figure out what we can fit within the limits that are already there.
The cost estimate for that project does not include major structural retrofitting of the bridge. As Ted has indicated, just like on 47th Street, we have to see if we can cobble in a couple extra feet of concrete and squeeze up the lane so we have at least one good sidewalk to go across it.
Okay. The intersection of New York and Pacific Highway, which is at the end of this project, is also along what in the legacy plan has as the envisioned linear park up and down Pacific Highway. So would the project look at including some sort of a linear park amenity at that intersection, or could we look at that? You know, whether it's just a couple of benches or something there that get started on doing some of those linear park amenities along Pacific Highway if we're actually going to be working on that intersection.
Councilmember Ranstetter, I think the simple answer is yes, and we'll be coordinating with parks at the time this project comes up for consideration for funding. Right now, something as small as that would be captured in the cost estimate as miscellaneous. It's a very small cost compared to the total project, but it would be something that we would be working with our Parks Director to identify what additional needs would be out there.
And I would say that the Public Safety Advisory Committee will be glad to see the Clover Creek Drive Southwest addition to the tip. Perhaps we can share the one-page summary of that with them through the chief's office.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Bulkey, do you have further questions?
I do, Mr. Mayor. Just one quick question. When I look at the conditions of the streets in the ones that you're adding, like Chicago Avenue, and are you thinking you're just going to be able to grind down and pave, or do these look like streets that are going to have to get torn up like we just had to do on 111th?
I think the proposal would be if the roads, at least Chicago and the snapshot I have here looks halfway decent, if we could saw cut and add on and possibly overlay on top of it and leave it there, would be the best and least costly. But if it has deteriorated enough, then yeah, it would probably, warrant a rebuild. I don't think we would start off that way if the pavement condition is in good enough shape.
Okay, so right now you think it would just be it would become a little bit wider than it is. Correct. That's what I'm guessing. When you say minor road widening, what does that mean?
Just making sure we're meeting our standards for the street classification, putting the curb and gutter in the appropriate spot.
And I guess lane markings and whatnot, because those are apparently missing also there.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Back to you, Mr. Busich. If you have anything further?
Nothing further, Mayor, but thank you for your time, and we've scheduled this for a public hearing coming up in the next couple of weeks for the public to provide comments on these additions.
Yeah. Thank you for the presentation, gentlemen, especially you, Mr. Ott. It was most informative.
Thank you.
So we'll next move to a Springbrook Park Master Plan and Clover Creek Restoration update. For this, we have Ms. Dodsworth.
Here I am. Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for the opportunity to share an update on the Springbrook Park Master Plan. I'm going to get set up here and hopefully we will be, move this little thing and see if that works. There you go. And I just learned another new trick, how I can use my mouse. So there we go. Can you see that? See my mouse moving? Everything ready? Great. So this project continues the ongoing support the city has done since incorporation on Springbrook Park. We're working to create a better quality of life and healthy space for the residents that live in this neighborhood. So the city received a Department of Commerce grant to do park expansion along with some creek restoration. So I thought I would just do a real quick summary. Most of you, I think, are very aware of this park and at this location, but I thought I'd just do a real quick summary of the area. So the city started dreaming about Springbrook Park back in 1996 when it incorporated. And you can see this was just an open space or some houses and kind of not a beautiful park area, but it was the only space that the community had. The city did their first master plan in 1999. You can see the project that was the dream there. And just a real quick side story. This project sort of bloomed out of two different Rotarian presidents who were in Canada at a conference, and they were sharing a room, and they both one day said, you know, what are we going to do to work together as a project? And that's kind of how Springbrook Park started. And the area is identified because a Rotarian from way, way back had owned the property, and the rest is history. So that's kind of cool that our collaborative community kind of started this project. So this was our first master plan in 1999, kind of a simple plan. And then in 2013, we had done a lot of work in the park to try and bring the area up to speed. We had received several grants to do park restoration and to purchase some property. And so we created this master plan to do development in that site. What happens while we're doing one project, two or three more are in the works. And so while we were getting ready to implement this project, we received legislative allocation to build the bridge. We'd gotten some conservation futures money to buy some more property and some more RCO funds to do expansion. So in 2006, we updated the master plan again to include those new areas that we had. We were ready to do some restoration work. So we then received a Department of Commerce grant to expand the park. And so we started with planning. We're working with Bruce Dees and Associates, and he had been working with this project for many, many years. So he had established relationships with the neighborhood folks. He'd been with us for many years at meetings. And so he was a great individual to work with on this project. We worked with lots of community partners. We did outreach for Springbrook Connections, several meetings for Springbrook Connections. We did outreach actually in the park. And as you can see, it's during COVID, hence the masks and the masks. It was on Halloween. And we did it at the park on a Saturday when the mobile food bank was there, because we have an opportunity to really speak with the residents who are living in that area. We also provided a Spanish translator, which really created a great engagement to be able to speak with everybody that was out there. So we heard a lot from folks. We asked them what they liked, what they wanted to see happen, what they were missing, what they like to do at the park, and just get more information from those folks. And that is where we also put this through the Park and Rec Advisory Board, who reviewed the project. And you have the 2021 master plan that you see today. So just as a quick comparison, so you can kind of see where we were and where we are now, you can see the main differences is that we have included all this area that the city has purchased, is working on redevelopment of. And you can see in our 2021 plan, we also had looked at doing restoration of this area across the bridge, because we do know it's a connector piece to the neighborhood, the neighbors that live up on that end of 47th Avenue. What we didn't accomplish, we did pretty much everything in this master plan in 2016, except for we didn't create the off-leash dog park, and we also didn't build this basketball court. So what I'd like to do is just go through the master plan with you real quickly and talk about some of the improvements that we're planning to make. So we heard a lot of folks about, without sidewalks. I know Public Works Director just talked about all the sidewalks and things they're going to be building in and around Springbrook, but there really aren't a lot of places to walk safely. So a lot of families come here. So they're using the sidewalks and using the park for walking. And loop trails are really important to the people that we talk to. So we're showing you in blue are the sidewalks and the loops that are there now. And then we're adding these loop trails so that people can get in and around the park. We're also going to be doing frontage improvements along Addison, as well as some improvements along 47th Avenue. Come on, there we go. The other thing that we're planning to do is to move and rebuild our community garden. That is definitely a keystone to this community. It's very used by all its citizens. Where it was over here in the last project, it's very isolated. There's lots of trees, there's lots of shade. We had a lot of problems with transits coming up through the creek, breaking into the garden, sleeping in the garden. And so we're moving it to this corner so it truly is sort of the entry to the park. It'll be very visible to everybody coming and going. And so that's going to be moved to this area. This is the gateway that we have for our Lakewood Community Garden over by First Baptist Church. And so we'll give it an equally grand entrance, as well as maintaining the gate that was built by an Eagle Scout. We'll be reinstalling that here. We'll be moving over also benches and things like that. And then we'll be also starting to utilize some of these metal raised bed garden boxes. They're very reasonable, easy to purchase. And when they're full of dirt, they won't, they'll last a lot longer. The other thing that we're going to be doing is also working with the Rotary to put in 2 food pantries there and a shelf system so that those with extra produce can then put it out for the community. They already share the benefits of the garden with the community for the weekly food bank. We were asked again about the basketball court, and so we have, where it was here in the original master plan, it's getting moved here so it's more accessible to these other areas. We'll be taking the hoops down, and then this area will be just for, hopscotch or riding your trike, and then we'll have a real basketball court here. If you've ever been to Springbrook Park, I think almost every single time I've been there, there's always somebody playing basketball there, so it's a very popular activity. The next activity we'll be doing is cleaning up our entrance. This, of course, might not be our entry sign. This was done several weeks ago after talking to council, but we'll be cleaning up this corner so it's really a nice gateway to the park and a nice way of knowing where you're at. We've already replaced these light poles around the park with LED lights, so we'll be cleaning up those light poles and painting them over. And then we'll be adding the loop trail, a new access here because the access we have isn't exactly ADA accessible, and then removing the backstop. And the reason that we're doing that is that the majority of the individuals that live in this neighborhood are Hispanic, and they want to play soccer. They're not baseball players. And so it really is a visible blockage in that area. So this will allow us to have a full soccer field this way and also be able to turn it this way for when, you wear down the goals, which happens, and we'll be able to do, have more open space there for the neighborhood to play with. The next activity is where this community garden is, which is, will be, taken apart. We're going to be adding a pump track. We heard from so many people, especially on the Saturday when we were there, that they bring their kids to ride their bikes at the park, and that there's a lot of conflict between people riding their bikes and people walking and jogging. And so adding this pump track here, as we talked about when we did the Ward Lake project, it'll provide that a new kind of a special experience, but also it'll give kids of all sizes and ages and wheeled devices the ability to ride their bikes in kind of a fun little area back here. And then finally, I just wanted to touch base. Creek restoration was a big part of this project. And so we had initially talked about doing restoration on both sides, but I just want to show you that when we did the first project, this is what the shoreline looked like. It was full of invasive material, and so we did go with the first project and clear that all out. We have since done a lot of planting, and that area is right here. So we'll be cleaning up this area, and then now that we own this lineage frontage along the creek here, we'll be doing also cleanup. We're planning to work with the Department of Ecology work crew. They do fantastic jobs because they can get in and out and keep some of the native things. And so depending on the ability time, we may be doing some work over here. And then Paul Busich is going to share a little bit about some of the restoration work that he's going to be doing and working on in the next couple of years in just a second. And then I think the final project that we're going to be doing out here is our off-leash dog park. This was highly requested in the 2016 plan. We didn't have the resources to really pull that off at the time. So the idea is to build this here. We initially were planning to put it over here on this side because of two reasons. One is it was, away from everybody, but also bringing people and their pets down here would eliminate some of the difficult things that are happening on this site with some of the transient and dumping and things like that. So we thought that would encourage a new use over here, but it didn't pass the wetland creek environmental muster. So we put it back in its original location, which is over here. And there'll be a fenced in area, and that'll be give people a chance to get around and play in the park with their pets. So the project funding, we initially received a $788,000 Department of Commerce grant. They do take a percentage out, and so our actual amount to spend is $757,540. Nowadays, if you get a Department of Commerce grant, they add the admin to the top of it. But back when we got this, it was a take it away. So, so the original cost estimate was based on $788 when we proposed, and that was without actually doing the master plan update. Proposed cost improvements. Since meeting with all of the residents and doing the additional planning and looking at the expansion, the project costs are more than what we anticipated. And so the total project cost for what I shared with you a few minutes ago is $1,100,000. It's about a $312,000 difference. And so we'll be looking for council authorization to move forward with doing the full project at $1.1 million. And we would be utilizing one-time general fund revenues to offset that. And that would be included if you approve in the next budget adjustment. So those are all my questions. I mean, all of my information, and just looking to answer your questions.
Questions from Ms. Dodsworth.
Oh, did you want to ask questions about the master plan first, Mayor, and then have Paul talk a little bit about the restoration that they're doing along the creek? Or would you prefer that he do it all?
Different categories. So.
Okay.
Ms. Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Love the park, love all the stuff that's getting ready to happen over there. We use it a lot, my whole family. So I'm really excited for the loop trail, especially. And then I was wondering about the community garden. Is that happening this year, or is that for the next?
Yes, so the community, we're not going to do any work until September, because being this is the only open space, we make a decision not to do anything during the summer because it's such an important space for our residents. Mm-hmm. So they would have the full growing season here this year, and then this would be happening late fall, early next year.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Ranstetter.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dodsworth, on the pump track, which is designed for bicyclists, but my understanding is it's a track of where once you get on it, you're not supposed to pedal. You're supposed to there's a manner in which you move around a pump track to be able to go and do that. So are we looking at perhaps once we put that in, of needing some program to teach particularly young people at how to use it safely and in the manner in which it's intended? And that's the one item in here that I'm just sort of unclear. What's the ongoing maintenance of that? Because this is the only pump track we're discussing putting in around the city.
Thank you. Great questions. The first question I'll do your second question first, is that it's asphalt, so it's much easier to maintain than a wooden, just a dirt surface. So we would asphalt it. We've actually talked about doing artificial turf in the center here, just because it's so bumpy, it's hard to mow. And and could be a water collector. So we're doing research on that now. It's the second pump track because the first one has been designed. It'll be the first one built because this will be done before Wards Lake, but we are proposing that one over at Wards Lake Park. But it's a great question about teaching kids how to ride. It's one of the things I was just doing some research on some programs that are out there. And of course, we'd be looking for partnerships and sponsors. But yeah, with our free mobile park program in the summer, partnering with groups like the Kiwanis, like the Steilacoom Kiwanis has a big bicycle rodeo, is that I think there's some really cool programs that we could do to bring bicycles out here for people to use, bikes and trikes, because you could bring small ones. If we can get the right partnerships and sponsorships, we could give bikes away with helmets to kids so that they had something to use while they're at the park. We can do competitions. You can do fun, bike. I think there was a group called the Rec Riders, REC Rec Riders. So there's lots of potential programs out there that we can use, and just highlighting and utilizing this space, again, making it a really active area and getting kids excited about it.
All right, well, thank you. I think, with the right incentives, to use it for its intended purpose, a pump track could be a really good amenity, not only in this park, but in some others. They're kind of the skate parks of this century to go on. Thank you.
So, Mary, I have a question about the dog park. I understand that the community wants it. It's a long hike to get to Fort Steilacoom.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I'm a bit concerned where I see we acquire all this property and the common use area doesn't expand. Give me an idea of the scale between the trail pathway and the creek, because that seems like a natural area over time to have picnic areas for folks. This creek's restored, it's removed from the traffic of the park, and I see the picnic shelter out there is constantly used. Is there enough space in there? Because once it's ceded to the dog park, the dogs will never give it back.
Yeah. Sure. So we have incorporated out here some, picnic tables and picnic areas. And I do agree with you, when this area gets opened up, there is quite a bit of distance. That's why we're able to do it in this area. Maybe it's illusional, it's a master plan. I don't have exactly the distance. I can get that for you, but there is quite a bit of distance between here and there. We do have the walking trail, and this is really an open space. And this will open up a little bit, but it does drop right about there down to the creek.
I'm not seeing that.
I'm not seeing it either.
You're not seeing my cursor?
No.
Yes, you can now.
Mm-mm.
You have to stop the slideshow, and then you can show it on the individual ones.
Stop the slideshow.
Yeah.
Okay. And well, let's see. Oh, and then do this? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. Let's just go to the dog park here.
There you go. Now we should be able to see your mouse move around.
How's that?
Yep.
Okay, let's do from current slide. Okay, so let's see. Here it comes. Ta-da. So what can you see that now? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you. So, we can configure this in any direction you want. We were just trying to fill in this space. We do have picnic tables along the creek. It does drop right about there. That's why this is a fence, along a little 2-rail fence. It does sort of drop right about there, so it's not going to expand too much out there.
Excuse
But
me,
the
Mary.
idea was just to create
Not
this.
seeing it.
You can't have the slideshow running. Go back to the base where we can see all the slides, and then we'll see your mouse again. You
Oh.
can't have the slideshow running.
Okay, so let's just do that and do this. How's that?
There we go.
All right, sorry about that, technology. Can you see my little mouse now?
Yep.
Good, I apologize for that. So the idea was to keep it just in this meandering space. And this is the dog park fence. This is the pathway. There are picnic tables along the creek side. This is a fence because it does drop right about there down to the creek. So the idea was to create an access point here and an access point here. And, it's a master plan. So if you're concerned that this area is not big enough, or you'd like to cut this area off for more entry space there, I mean, if you're concerned that it's too big, we can certainly go back and take a look at that before we, do final.
My concern is that there's enough space between the north, where your cursor is now, and the fence line of the dog park there, and the drop off, so that with restrictions regarding structures in back from creeks, etc., that we possibly someday could have some picnic structures in there. Because it rains here sometimes.
Sure. That's a great idea. We can take a look at it. These would be the two probably best spots for that. We can take a look at that now. And there is enough space to do something like a small picnic shelter like we would have the smaller ones like at Fort Steilacoom and at some of the other parks. So, but we can take a look at that.
My concern was with the size of the dog park is the fact that it might take the best real estate. And they're repeated at Chambers Bay, there are repeated requests by the dog park proponents to give them 10, 20 acres on the water.
Oh, yes, yes.
So it just
Yeah.
kind of line here.
Yeah. We'll double check that. There is enough room between here and the creek because we did check that out because again, this was our first choice and we moved back over here. But we'll take a look at that and we'll take a look at that and see if maybe this gets shortened or something so that there's a little bit more space here. That's an easy one to do.
Thank you. Mr. Bulkey.
First of all, I'd agree with the mayor on that. Maybe you might want to bring, although that's the trail, right? One of the new trails that you're putting in is right there along the fence line.
Yeah, that's the trail. And then this ... is the fence for the dog park. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with the mayor. You might want to maybe stub that dog park part in on the north side a little bit to give us a little bit more room along the north side there before the creek. Yeah. I do want to show you something though, Mary, if you guys can see me. I found this tonight in my pile because I'm sitting in the study, right? And so I want to congratulate you and all your folks for their hard work and the city council for its foresight and persistence in this park. This is actually dated. This came off the assessor's website of that area in May of 2012. So, and we have, I think at the time we owned 3 of the parcels and you had purchased, I think you had already purchased that 4th parcel, the long parcel. And then we purchased all these other parcels to make that park complete. So just, good job on that. We've made a nice urban park and I'm excited about the prospects for this.
Any other questions for Ms. Dodsworth before we go to Mr. Busich? Mr. Busich, you're up. Tell us how the stream is going to be restored.
But first, I want to tell you what we're going to do to help look at solving the problem with all that flooding we have out there. And the two are tied together. So as you recall, we have identified a significant flooding problem over the Springbrook area, including I-5, Bridgeport, Pack Highway. We put a pause on doing a letter of map revision with FEMA so we could do an engineering evaluation to find out what kind of solutions might avail ourselves to this problem. So far, we have talked with a couple of different firms. We're looking to hire someone in the next 4 to 6 weeks. As a part of that, though, we've also identified that any solution should be cognizant of our desire in 2 years to do an assessment of the stream and the corridor and the habitat from basically JBLM property, railroad, just south of that, all the way down to Silicon Lake. So when Mary and I have been talking about what could be done on the park, we have both sides of the creek. So there's a significant amount of real estate frontage on the creek that could have improvements done to it beyond just clearing out vegetation and some plantings. We also have the property that you can see on your screen, I believe, that has a pond on it. It's across the creek from the park proper, the developed park proper. That pond right now, what I've heard, anecdotally, used to be basically a stock watering pond. I've heard two things, that and the other fact is that it's used for fish rearing. So I tend to believe it's more for stock watering than not. There's some concrete structures that divert water into the pond and then let it back out. From a habitat perspective, though, it's terrible because the water heats up and any fry that get in there, they get basically cooked. It's not good for the fish. It's not good rearing habitat right now. However, it has the potential to be really good fish habitat for rearing and in salmon and for refugia during large slow events. So as we're doing the engineering evaluation to figure out how we can alleviate, prevent, or greatly reduce the flooding that occurs in the Springbrook area, we're also going to be looking at that property as potential part of a solution. Do we build setback levees so we allow water to flow into here during those large events? And then how do we incorporate this property, then the rest of the property from the railroad track down to Silicon Lake for habitat? One of the things that I personally don't appreciate is what I call random projects of kindness. And when it comes to habitat, that happens a lot. People think that, hey, this is great. The stream could do with some large wood debris. So let's go to one location. We'll throw some logs in. But without adequate modeling, you don't know what the logs are going to do. I've seen locations where people put those in a good faith effort to improve habitat, but they put them in the wrong orientation. The water gets diverted not away from the banks, but towards the banks, and they become a real erosion problem. They start damaging people's properties. I've also seen locations where people go in and they want to tear out the vegetation because they don't like it, but they don't know the right kind of vegetation to put back in. And by clearing all the vegetation and the trees, they've actually made it a predation ground for raptors to come in and eat all the fish as they're going through. So our plan here is to, in 2 years, after we do the engineering evaluation to find what can be done, but also then to look at the stream habitat from upstream down to downstream and to develop a long-range plan that incorporates what is feasible within this corridor. Not everything is going to be feasible from a habitat perspective. When we have that in place, now when people come and say they want to do good things for the stream, we can say, that's awesome. Here's what you can do. And here's how it actually provides value and benefit to the habitat within the city. And then for the salmon who are migrating through here, upstream through the base and further points up towards Mount Rainier. So in a nutshell, that's where we are right now. I'm recommending that to Mary, basically for the property across the creek from Springbrook Park proper, that a minimal amount of investment right now be done to clean it up. Because in 2 years, we may very well find that there are some great things that we could do from a habitat perspective as well as flood control. It's our best opportunity because we already own the property. We can do some great things there and incorporate it into the park with education, streamside walks, large woody debris put in right, digging out the pond, getting rid of the concrete, putting in the right kind of habitat and vegetation around it so that instead of becoming a heat sink, it actually becomes a refuge area for fish to actually use year round. So that's what we're doing. That's where we're going with it. First, the engineering feasibility evaluation with an open eye to making sure we don't preclude anything as far as habitat unintentionally. Now, we may end up deciding that we don't have a lot of choices, but right now, that's the goal. Any questions?
Questions from Mr. Busich? Mr. Branstetter?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, Mr. Busich and Mary, as we look to convert the property on the opposite side of the bridge to park uses, in conjunction with the restoration plans. Are we going to have to buy that property from the stormwater utility to make it part of the park? And was that included in the budget that we saw earlier?
If I may, Mary and I have talked quite a bit about this property. And I feel, having been a utility manager of stormwater, that we have an opportunity here to use it as a park, but with a specific education component for stormwater and habitat. So we can work the two together. It will still serve as a stormwater function as a utility property through public education and outreach, as well as with the habitat improvements on there. So I think there's a lot that we can do without having to transfer money from the general fund to the stormwater utility, because it will be serving the stormwater utility function when we're done with it.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what's the timeline on the study again?
So the study for doing the engineering evaluation will be starting this year. It's going to take us a while, and not because the engineering is all that difficult, but because of the public outreach component of it. This project, this evaluation, this process needs to include a lot of different stakeholders. I was talking to the consultants today, and we need JBLM involved, because when the flooding occurs, they're going to have a hard time getting people in and out of that gate into McCord. There's other avenues, but I-5 will be shut down, Bridgeport will be shut down, Pack Highway will be shut down. Everyone's going to be funneling off through Gravity Lake Drive. So JBLM, Washington State Department of Transportation, in two different ways. Obviously, their Olympic Region office, as well as their State Hydraulics office, who we've already been in contact with them, and they've been involved in the evaluation of the model. FEMA will be involved. Pierce County will be involved from surface water management, from probably the exec's office, because there's a property there that they would like to sell and make some revenue on. And then also Pierce County has a flood control district, and we'll be looking to tap them for some of the funding for a solution, and or potentially even expanding this feasibility analysis. We feel we need to have at least outreach to the business owners and residents to let them know what we're doing, how we're going about it. I have no doubts that the businesses will want to have someone sitting there as part of the stakeholders in conversation with us. We're going to need the Department of Ecology, Department of Fish and Wildlife. We're going to need the Puyallup tribe, potentially the Muckleshoot tribe. The list really does go on. So a lot of this first body of work is going to be having the stakeholder group at different levels, where they are either A, informed, or B, they're helping as far as the decisions. Fish and Wildlife and the tribes are going to be very, very interested in any kind of engineering solution we come up with, because it's going to impact habitat. So they need to be a part of this process. So at least we hear from them their concerns, so we can see if we can address them. Pierce County proper needs to be involved, because this solution may result in recommendations for upstream detention facilities that they don't currently have on their plans, in order to alleviate and take off some of the peak flows that are coming into Lakewood from all the acreage that's upstream of us outside of our area. JBLM may also have an opportunity to do some on-site detention somewhere that would help us. As you can tell, the list of active interests is large. And if we get people on board now, FHWA also, because it's an interstate commerce issue as well as a defense issue. So there's a long list of people who will want to be engaged in this. And even if they want to just know what's going on, I'm anticipating that this first phase of work will take us a year before we can come back with recommended solutions and how they would go about being implemented. And then the next thing is identifying who's going to take the lead for the solutions. Department of Transportation won't be very happy when I-5 is shut down for 2, 3, 4, 5 days at a time, nor will we, because all that traffic is going to try and pump through the city of Lakewood. We have two primary east-west roads, Steilacoom Boulevard and Washington Boulevard. We'll be taking care of both of them, but we can't take I-5 traffic. Last Friday, you saw, if you were paying attention, you saw what happened to I-5 northbound when it was shut down for 10 hours. I came in to sign some documents at the office, and it took me an hour and a half using back roads to get back to the Sumner Bonnie Lake area to get home, because 512 was literally stop and go from I-5 all the way up past Pacific to Auburn. And if we flood at this location, as the model is predicting, there is no alternative route other than through Lakewood. The stream restoration work will start, is budgeted for 2 years, in 2 years' time. So, thank you.
Oh, is getting out your crystal ball, is there a possibility in all this that a recommendation would come up that would include a dike or levee on the north side, on the low side of the stream?
Yes. I'd say there's really about 4 different real engineering solutions. The first one is never a favored one, but it's always one we have to evaluate. That is the do nothing scenario. We already know what the do nothing means. We've already looked at that. The second alternative is a setback levee located somewhere. It could be it's not going to be a linear levee, because there's properties that we won't want to protect, other ones we will want to protect. Keeping in mind that we're talking about the 100-year flood. So in a normal rainfall, the water will never even reach the levee. That's why putting a levee around that swim property that Councilmember Branstetter was pointing out is not a bad solution. We can still have public use of it, recreational use, habitat use, and yet we can still take advantage of some storage during extreme events that will alleviate it downstream. Our modeling shows that downstream, that the channel has the capacity to take the flow. The problem is that this stretch of Springbrook, the bank is too low on that side, so it flows over. So definitely some form of a setback levee or a flood wall is something we will evaluate. We can also look at a pipeline that would take water through a pipe, a new pipe constructed to take it out into Silicon Lake. I will tell you that in 1998, the city initiated a study because of the flooding around the apartment complex right there at just, up far, thank you, Mary. It's further downstream, the bigger complex, that's upstream, the other direction, downstream of Springbrook Park. There was flooding of an apartment complex in there. And the firm that did that came up with a couple of solutions, and not a lot different from what we're talking about here, because there really isn't much you can do. And their cost for doing a pipeline was exorbitantly high. But at that time, we didn't have the State Department of Transportation actively engaged in it, because the freeway was not shown as being flooded for a variety of reasons. The other option is to look upstream, look for others upstream to provide some additional detention, so that we don't get the peak flows coming through. The regular flows up to a certain level we can handle, but when you get over a certain threshold, that's when it spills. Can't remember, I think there was a fourth one. Unfortunately, in this case, providing infiltration won't work, because we know we're in a high groundwater table. So we actually have a problem even when the creek isn't flooding. If there's enough flow through the creek, and then a couple of weeks later, we start seeing groundwater flow. Groundwater starts surfacing in that area. Thankfully, they don't happen at the same time, so we know that if we can handle the big one, then the smaller groundwater flow would be more of what I consider to be a nuisance, and it does not affect I-5, and it would not affect the development of the sites out there. So,
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Busich? Well, thanks for giving us an update on that and the options, and look forward to that progressing. And kudos to particularly the Mary Dodsworth and the Parks folks. As Mr. Bolke pointed out, this has been a long-term project, but the trajectory has been steadily in the right direction. And it's great to see an urban park grow out of no public property. So that's really pretty amazing. So a lot of hard work went into that. Thank you. We'll stay with Ms. Dodsworth to talk about the Seeley Lake Master Plan, the Seeley Stormwater Detention Pond. And I see you're on mute, Mary.
Thank you. I was talking to myself anyway, so it's okay. I was, can you see that? And then I was also getting my fancy little,
Off center, but we can see it.
okay, yes.
You
So
find it.
we'll find it. Okay, so thank you for allowing me to continue the conversation. I wanted to provide you with an update regarding our Seeley Lake Public Access Plan. So as a reminder, Seeley Lake is a 48-acre park site. It's located next to the Lakewood Community Center, across the street from the school district bus barn and near the police station. And it's a site that is, again, 48 acres in size, has a 1.5-mile perimeter trail around it, and it's owned by Pierce County. They actually call it, it's identified as a resource conservation park in their system. So we started a project right in the middle of COVID, a cooperative planning process early last year, and Pierce County and the City of Lakewood were working together on it. Pierce County had some resources in their plan to do some work, planning work at the site. City of Lakewood, a stormwater program, had resources in there to do some stormwater assessment. And when I was talking to the different folks, you know, we've always had an interest in looking at the safety, recreation, and public access. So we thought it was a great way of coming together as a community. We work well with Pierce County to do a program together. We had $150,000 invested in this process, with the City of Lakewood putting in $50,000 and Pierce County putting in $100,000. So the first element, it was a three-phased element. The first element was they looked at stormwater and water quality. And so it started with the basin map, which of course this is way busier than you'd need to see the details. But it was an assessment of all the water coming in and going out. There are multiple areas and multiple users. The green is the industrial park. The pink here is commercial development. This red up here is residential. And then this purplish color is the Seeley Lake Lodge in the Lakewood Community Center, where we have our senior activity center most of the time. And so there's about 300 acres, no, pardon me, about 400 acres of runoff that are going into the Seeley Lake. And so they looked at where it's coming from, the inlet and the intake areas and the outfall areas. And they looked at the capacity. They did water quality flow rates and 100-year flood rate models, and looked at the different stormwater water quality systems that are in there. And there's a variety of different kinds of systems connected to all the different systems. And then every time somebody improves an area, which some of these areas have been improved over the years, you know, stormwater system improvements are being made. So how it was first created with everything just dumping in there, there's been a lot of improvement that's been made over the years. And of course, this is not my area of expertise, but there were 3 different teammates kind of working on this project. And so Public Works Engineering and their stormwater manager was working on this with the consultants, and then also the stewardship folks from Pierce County. And they were looking at a variety of, you know, solutions. Could improvements be made? Because of the nature of the lake and the retention facility and the area, you know, initially some kind of a mechanical treatment device would be the most practical for doing the treatment at the end of the pipe at the lake. But they determined that the flows are high and the system is pretty large. You'd have to put a pretty big, expensive system in place to make that happen. And I'm not sure that that was the solution anybody was that interested in doing at that particular location. So based on the large flow, it was recommended that treatment not be provided at the end of the pipe, which is in the lake, but that rather upstream and smaller basin, upstream improvements of the smaller basins, those treatment systems, so it didn't overload and it would be more efficient. And again, that's been happening throughout history. So when we looked at the environmental, and that was really the wetlands and the plants and the animals and the habitat, as well as the recreational use and safety of the area, this was a kind of our initial map. And you can see we looked at all these little dots or various locations, and So we did brainstorming on solutions. What are the issues? What are the concerns? What are the impacts? What are some of the potential solutions? And have come up with a variety of improvements that would help make this area function better and be safer for the community. So we'll just start and take a little walk around the lake. Which is of course a retention pond. So here is the main entrance. So here's the Lakewood Community Center, here's the bus barn. And so this is really the main entrance that you see all the time. It's not a great entry to a habitat area or an urban park. You go from the parking lot up here, you drop down this very steep hill. It goes into sort of a dark hole. There's some parking down there. It doesn't have a real great entrance area, and it feels a little sketchy sometimes when you're down there. I don't know if that's a technical term, but and then also the trail comes right in and hits the parking lot, and so it isn't a true loop trail system through the area. So we really thought that there could be some great improvements here that would really show a good use of the resources that we spent, but also make a better impact, make it more welcoming to people of all abilities, and make it more accessible to people who want to use the park. So the idea is to remove some parking spots down here, bring the entrance up closer to the upper area, so it didn't feel like you're going down into a hole. Taking that path and creating a true loop trail so it would connect to the whole trail. So you would have a loop system regardless of where you might access, and then making some improvements in this, what we call the picnic area. The next place along the line is this isn't exactly the culvert because I couldn't find my picture, but it looks very similar to that, except for we have a big black grate on it. It's kind of scary, and it looks like you could just fall into a hole. It works and it's functioning properly, but we thought this would be an excellent area to do some beautification and aesthetic treatments here. Add a little fencing so that you couldn't just fall into here. And then also some education. Pierce County has some really great stormwater, environmental interpretive signs. And so we would do some interpretation there and help people know, what is that? Why is it there? What's it used for? There's also a little bit of space on this side that could be for some on-site treatment if we felt like there was some flooding or overflow happening. It's so kind of deep in that area that doesn't happen often, but there is, again, an area, if budget allows, to do a little on-site treatment there. Walking around this area right here until you get to this corner was highly, highly vegetated. You couldn't really see from Lakewood Drive when you're driving. You could every once in a while see down to where the trail was, tons of trees. The great thing is that between the start of this study and today, Pierce County has a Department of Ecology work crew that they have year-round, and their stewardship team came out there, and they have done so much work. So hopefully you've noticed, and if not, I would welcome you next time you drive down Lakewood Drive to take a look in there. They have cut all kinds of vegetation. They've cut things back. They've taken out some dangerous trees and really opened it up. And it really reminded me of two things. One is when we did the work around Wallhop Lake, and we had to take out the trees, the dead and dying trees, it opened it up and it made it so much lighter. People were so excited about that space and reminded us how open it was and how much light it was. It felt so much safer and open. And so I think that is creating that same kind of an opportunity here. On this corner here, again, you can't really access down to the trail. We have a beautiful new sidewalk all along Lakewood Drive that our Public Works Department has put in. And so this is Hobby Lobby. And so when you're walking down here, if you wanted to get on the trail, you had to either tromp down a hill or walk all the way here to the main entrance. And so the idea is to create better public access to the trail. And so as you're walking down Steilacoom Boulevard, Lakewood Drive, Hobby Lobby's over here, that little driveway that goes down, is that we would create an access point here so that you could they're calling it kind of a pocket park, but it would be an access point here that would get you right down to the trail. And then if you're coming up the way here, you could also access the park right there. And again, this area was heavily, heavily vegetated. It's been limbed up and ivy's been removed. And there's still some work that needs to be done in that area, but it's opened it up and it would create new public access, get you right on the trail system in a safe and legal manner. I'm going to kind of show you this next area, and we're going to focus right here. And this is a corner when you're down on the trail that goes to the back side of the Hobby Lobby area. There's a lot of problems in this area, a lot of vegetation. The fence is always being torn down and broken. You can see the area approaching there. It's there were remnants of transient and homelessness and naughty things that are happening along there. So this area again has also been cleared out. The graffiti wall is still there. There's still discussion regarding whether we keep a graffiti wall or paint it. It's quite a long wall. We don't know whose wall it is. We'll be doing some survey work there. But there's an access point here, which is through a brick opening. And then this is an access that's just a real troubled area. Nobody's really coming down to this corner because it's the best, safest way to get into the park. It's really a lot of garbage. And again, if you're really wanting to get into the park, you're probably not doing this kind of an activity. So we're working with a solution on either creating an opening so that it's just easy access down there because maybe they want to get quick access to the park, or fencing it off and doing something with a lot of vegetation like limbs and rocks or logs and plantings to kind of discourage that kind of activity, because we are creating these new nice openings down here. It's work in progress there. The next area is that one of the things that we hear about from everybody is that you can't use the trail year round because it floods. So the idea is how do you get from here to there when there's water? Is you can put in a raised boardwalk structure, which would be fantastic. And but we do know how expensive raised boardwalks are, and so that's contributed to the overall, $1 million price for all of these improvements. So in the short term, the idea is, and when you're out there, this was actually I think it was February. It was a beautiful, crisp winter day. Flooded over. The ducks are floating back and forth, and it's lovely. So the idea is that wetlands flood and the trail floods, and so maybe what we do is put some interpretive sign here and one on the other side that talks about, I'm sorry you can't pass through this trail on this temporary time, and then that could give you some education. We could do some education there as well about wetlands and water flow and habitat, etc. So there's a short-term, long-term solution there. And then as you keep walking around the trail, those of you can see there's apartment complexes and housing back here. And so there's all kinds of interesting ways to get down to the trail. You can see this old stair system that just drops there. There's a brick wall or stone wall that is right in someone's backyard. You can throw your mattress right from that balcony and it'll get right onto that public property. And then again, these just homemade trails all through this area. So the idea is around here is to do survey work to find out really what's private property, what's public property, and do some fencing, like not barrier fencing, like big chain link fencing, even though we did talk about putting some privacy fencing up there if that ended up being, park property, is like 2-rail wooden type fencing to kind of create aesthetics, meandering around the trail, keep people on the trail and out of some of these more sensitive areas around the lake, and again, cleaning it up so you don't get people hiding back here and trying to sleep in the park for an extended period of time. And then the finale before you get back to the entrance is, this is the backside of the Seeley Lake Lodge as well as the Lakewood Community Center. And it's not very pretty. This is actually the balcony. When you go through these doors, you're in the main room at the Senior Activity Center where we do a lot of social activities and our exercise classes. It connects to the art room. So it's a really, really nice balcony that you can actually get out and, look at the beautiful trees and the birds and all of that that's happening in the lake. But it's not real pretty. And there are places where people can kind of hang out here and maybe do some naughty things. So the idea is to do some cleanup and beautification back here, maybe some public art or some fencing that is better than just chain link fencing, so that it kind of keeps people from being able to hide under these spaces and just kind of make it more of an aesthetic pleasing experience as you go along the trail. The other idea is, and in summary, is that with our limited resources, we would be looking at, for phase 1 of construction or development, is to focus on these areas: the entry area, this little pocket park, public access area from Lakewood Drive. Clean up all along the trail to do the trail surfacing, just to do kind of a once over with probably 1/8 inch minus in a little bit of rock that's compacted in there. Again, very hard surface, still natural trail, but make it hard and compacted. And then here is just some fencing and some beautification along this area to kind of clean the area up. So those are sort of the big picture and next phase of our project. Again, Pierce County put $100,000 into the project. City of Lakewood put in $50,000. So our total was $150,000 to do something to improve that space. The master plan and the basin studies and all of that work was about $43,000. The phase 2 is to do construction drawings. A good portion of that is some survey work. And it also, some of the planning is really with time and materials, so that if we decide that we don't need, fancy construction drawings for putting in these fencing, that would reduce the cost of that. But we just want to make sure we have capacity for that. We'll be bringing or putting a phase 2 contract with SCJ Alliance on the next studies or the next council agenda, so we can keep moving forward with the phase 2 of the project. And then we have about $66,500 to do improvements. What we find is with the creative use of resources, as we always do with our partnerships and our collaborations, is that we hope that we can stretch this to do many of those improvements that I've talked about today. So that's the Seeley Lake Master Plan update. Are there any questions?
Yes. Ms. Moss.
Mr. Mayor, Ms. Bosworth, I'm not familiar with that trail. I know where it is, but I've never walked it. But the runoff, the flooding is basically from the runoff. There's not a body of water in there, is there?
Oh yeah, all of this is what we call Seeley Lake, and so it's a stormwater retention pond that we call a lake. Just like Ward's Lake is a stormwater retention pond that we call a lake, but it's all water.
It's all water.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm so impressed with all the work that's been done in the parks. You guys have done a great job. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. This is, again, one of those places like Ms. Moss. I have admittedly never walked because I've always heard it's been a little sketchy down there. So to the extent you can turn that into a running trail across in the Y, it may be a great thing for the community.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can improve those trails. So my question is, your initial comments mentioned that it's a county asset,
Mm-hmm.
which is an oddity to me here in the city. So what's the scoop with that?
Well, I believe, I'm not sure of the total history, but I believe that the county purchased this property back in the day when they were developing Lakewood Community Center as well. And I think they actually used it as a stormwater mitigation site for another project they were doing somewhere else. I think way before cityhood. So I'm not sure how that all works, but it is adjacent to this county property that they own, and they do consider it a conservation resource area.
Is there value in us eventually getting title to it, or does it really matter? And I'm thinking about, we struggled hard to do that with regard to Fort Silicon Park before we invested, many more millions. And I'm wondering if we should do the same here.
I think that there's probably, if council decides that that's an expansion of our park system, then, we certainly could consider that. I think there will be conversations in the future regarding whose stormwater pond is it. It certainly is owned by the county, but it's the city system that dumps into it. And so there was quite a number of conversations regarding that, which again, I'm not the stormwater person, so I'm not that familiar with all of the ins and the outs regarding that. But there is going to probably have to continue to be some conversations because it's working and it's functioning. But when it doesn't, whose responsibility is it to fix? And so that was some of the questions, and I don't have the answers for that.
What do we know about police calls for service for either homelessness issues in there or miscreants doing naughty things in there? Has it been a problem in the past?
I think there is certainly remnants of it being an issue. I don't know if I have any data on that. We could certainly check on that and report that back. But I think a lot of the homeless stuff that happened here, there was a major cleanup. I think I mentioned, they came in and did the trail work. The Department of Ecology crew can't do any kind of homelessness restoration. So they actually brought a hazmat team in to clean up this area along the wall. It was riddled with
Bad.
years and years of stuff, but it's all wide open now and clean. And, again, you clean something up, it's easier to maintain. And I think the area over here, it's very similar to in our parks, is that, they see a tent, they see a tarp, they investigate it, they work with whoever the county works with. I don't know if their sheriff comes out or if they work with our police department, but then they just go in and clean it up as soon as they can. So, but I can get some information on that if you like. But again, it was dark and heavily vegetated, and they've started that work. I think it'll make it a lot easier to use. And just the old days, they used to, you must not have been doing the right classes at the Y, because they used to leave the Y, run across the road, lap the lake, and get back. That was part of, I think, one of Charlie's classes.
Yeah, that was a few years ago, but I think it's anecdotally had reputation for being not the greatest place to go.
Yeah.
So to the extent we can clean that up with the fine work you're doing, I'm all for putting resources into it. But at some point, you kind of wonder, shouldn't we own it, right? So anyway, good work.
So a little bit of background on that. The one of the reasons it was retained when Lakewood gained cityhood, normally parks go to the municipality, but that building was the Pierce County Parks headquarters building.
Oh.
And until very recently, the administration has since moved. So it's not a very desirable building. So there's some complications. Mr. Branstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mary, this is one of those areas that is actually very enjoyable in dry weather when you can get out there, and there's actually quite a bit of wildlife, and it's and there's not much sound, not much noise, so it's very quiet. So I'm looking to see that we're going to do some things and make it even passable more often. However, in the report here, it says we're going to be asking the city manager to approve a contract amendment in an amount not to exceed $100,000, which is in a phase to get us started on the entire list of problems there. But is that $100,000 of new money, or is that carrying forward what's left from the original $150,000?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Branstetter. I apologize. That was very confusing. And so I tried to clarify it on this slide here, if you can see that. What we're going to be doing is coming for authorization to enter into phase 2. And because the initial contract was less than $50,000, but any additional money will put it over $100,000 or over $50,000. The city manager would need to sign. So we're not looking for any new money. This is all money that's been appropriated already, and it was carried forward in the last budget. So the next phase would be just for the contract with SCJ Alliance. And then once we have construction drawings and bidding, and we need those resources for improvements, we'll come back to you for approval of that contract.
Thank you.
Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Dodsworth, my question is about on that one satellite image of Seeley Lake. At the very top, there's a privately owned parcel, or what we think is a privately owned parcel, that goes out into the pond.
Yes.
Can you explain that? And is that a potential problem?
I don't think it's a potential problem. It's a really funny parcel. It's privately owned. I don't really know the history of it. The individuals came to the city, sent me a note back in, it was when Kathy Kravitz Smith was the director back then. So that's how long ago it was. And the people that owned it wanted the city they wanted to give it to the city with the idea they could put some kind of a marker out there for somebody that in their family that had passed away. And we politely declined because we didn't see that as being a resource the city needed to take on in the middle of a county area. So I did pass all that information to the county, and I'm not sure that they move forward with that. So I don't think it's a problem because the people really aren't interested in it. I think they pay about $12 a year in property tax, if anything. And I think they'd just like to clean that up. So it would really be more appropriate for the county to take that property.
Okay, so that was I began to wonder if it had become tax title property, but they still are paying the taxes on it.
I do believe they are, and it's a really funny little space. And so we did have that conversation about should we even be planning a trail through there on the corner, because very little of it, as you can you see my cursor? I never know if I'm on, but the corner that's at the, I guess be the northwest side of it, is everything else is on water. So it's actually out in the thing, but a little bit of the trail does go across the back corner.
Do we have any more lots like that in there? There looks like another one to the left of that now too, that it goes across some land.
That's
Somebody else's.
That's only what I'm aware of, but we are going to do some survey work to determine some of these points that we're not quite sure whose property is what before we make any improvements.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Caulfield.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to get back to Deputy Mayor Whalen's question regarding some of the activity down there. Just wanted to point out that our CSRT team has been working very proactively with particularly Pierce County facilities over the last few years to address a number of issues. So quite frankly, it's not what maybe you had heard about what it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. As a matter of fact, Pierce County Facilities is extremely proactive in not just reacting to any concerns by the city, but actually on their own and being proactive in maintaining that facility down there, more of a park-like facility as opposed to a stormwater facility. So just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you.
I can tell you that 4 years ago, there were homeless folks camping under that overhang balcony.
Mm-hmm.
That is police. Mary, just an FYI, the county has additional youth ecology corps type teams that have been funded through a special program in the next biennium, both in parks and in public works. And to a certain extent, they are, excess trail and cleanup folks, not homeless camp cleanup, but just work you were describing being done there. So if there are opportunities for that, both the folks that have a responsibility for the pond itself and the Parks Department should have some additional capabilities that you might encourage them to use.
That's great, thank you. And they've suggested things like trail work, that little fencing area. They can do all those kinds of projects. So that's great. That'll be able to stretch those dollars.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the update.
Okay.
And we'll now move to the next item of business, which is an American Rescue Plan ARPA update. We have Tiffany Spears and Brian Humphreys.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Tiffany Spear, and Mr. Humphreys is here as well, and I'll bring him in to the discussion shortly. The purpose of this presentation is to simply update you on what has happened on the federal level regarding the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, and how the city will need to move going forward in reaction to that. So I will share my screen to begin. Oops. So just today, actually, this is hot off the press, the Department of the Treasury issued its initial guidance to not only federal government, but to states and local governments, including the category that Lakewood is in, which is metropolitan cities. They did a final calculation of the amount of funding that Lakewood is qualified for based on what is said within ARPA about how to calculate those dollars. And it is a total of about $13,765,000, a little over that. And so the two tranches, one of which the city could actually be requesting now, is 6.88 million, and then another tranche for next year of the same amount. The costs have to be incurred by December 31st of 2024, but the Treasury did clarify that the period of performance, or the amount of time that the city has to actually pay with the funds, is actually another 2 years beyond that. So incurring costs, committing dollars by December 31 of 24, and then spending dollars by 2026. There are some additional guidance documents that explain in a little more detail than the act itself did what the city could be spending funds on and what are eligible uses. And those that I've highlighted in blue relate to some extent to what's been discussed by the council in study sessions and its retreat on March 27th. So public communication, PPE, ventilation improvements in facilities, capital investments, and adaptation of public buildings were all cited in the guidance today. Related to what funds could be used for households, none of this is a big surprise, I don't think, but quickly, food assistance, rent, mortgage, or utility assistance, counseling and legal aid, cash assistance, emergency assistance, internet or library assistance, or literacy assistance, excuse me, or job training. Related to businesses and nonprofits, the eligible uses include loans and grants of several kinds, mitigating financial hardship, implementing prevention or mitigation tactics, and then technical assistance, counseling, or other services. If funds or grants or loans are provided to businesses and nonprofits, there is a recommendation by Treasury that the recipients maintain records explaining how the costs being covered by the loans or grants relate to negative impacts of the COVID pandemic and how the aid is helping those recipients respond to the impacts. A couple of things to clarify regarding government services and how the funds can be used for that. The lost revenue that can be reimbursed, if you will, through ARPA include revenue from taxes, current charges, and miscellaneous general revenue. The government services can include maintenance of infrastructure or pay-go spending for new infrastructure, modernizing cybersecurity and protection of critical infrastructure, health services, environmental remediation, school or education services, and then provision of public safety services. One of the things that was highlighted in today's guidance from Treasury was that the local government funds actually cannot be used for replenishing rainy day or reserve funds because those would not be considered responding to the public health emergency or relating to the provision of government services. It's saving funds for future spending needs. So that may affect going forward the city's consideration of how to utilize its dollars. At the federal level, you've got already identified in ARPA about $37.5 billion going toward homeowners, renters, and individuals experiencing homelessness. That is broken out by rental assistance to homeowner assistance funds to, again, homelessness support through the Home Investment Partnership Program. And then Pierce County has allocated about 50 million of its 88 million that's part of its first tranche. This lays out all of the details, but essentially covering some COVID-related costs, including, for instance, facility adaptations, operational impacts, court backlog. It talks about economic stabilization, including technical and entrepreneurship grants. There are additional business assistance and nonprofit assistance for $8 million. There's a community response and resilience, which covers quite a few numbers of things, but really human services priorities. And then there's the public health emergency response. Following all of this, the city did receive as well an invitation to join Pierce County and the other cities of Pierce County on May 27th on a cooperative Zoom call to identify issues where there may be a way to synchronize or maximize use of these funds by the various jurisdictions. So the 3 items at the bottom explain what this is for. This was a joint invitation from the county executive and the county council chair. But providing an ARPA background, sharing what the county has already funded, and then coming up with further plans and shared priorities. There's also been an invitation coming to our economic development manager from the county's economic development department, asking that the city consider a $500,000 contribution toward the BIPOC opportunities, the entrepreneurial and technical assistance program that the county is considering to create, looking at training, technical resources, financial reporting systems, navigators. Again, this is for BIPOC focus in particular, and small businesses as well. The idea here is you have a multi-year effort where the city of Lakewood, other cities, nonprofits, the business community overall, and then the county would all be cooperating with each other. So that's a request that was received this last week. On March 27th, when the city discussed ARPA at its council retreat, there were 3 policies I agreed to. First of all, recognizing that ARPA is intended for one-time costs, but there may be an appropriate way for the city to do one-time dollar expenditures, maybe for pilot programs or starting other programs up. Other policies, the city council wanted to really expand this idea of community engagement. And so part of its direction to the city after that retreat was to come up with a recommendation regarding community engagement. And this presentation will include that. And then there was also the recognition that 1% set aside for both 22 and 23 should be sent to Community Services Advisory Board for identification for human services allocations, in addition to what they would already get from the general fund. So this list is a summary of what a majority of the council felt was appropriate use of the ARPA dollars on March 27th. So there were a number of other items identified as well, but these are all the ones that at least 4 council members on that 27th identified as something they'd support. So backfilling revenues and reserves, and again, that just has to be qualified by the new guidance coming out today. The allocation in 22 and 23 to the Community Services Advisory Board, improving the city website for better virtual access to city services, supporting arts and entertainment venues and cultural activities, as well as international district businesses, several facility improvements to the city hall, city council chambers, city parks facilities, looking at LASA and working with them to expand their facilities and services for the homeless, starting up or enhancing a summer youth core employment opportunity program. Again, looking at some city facilities and improvements that could be made there, hosting a small business resource and education center, and also a one-stop shop where the city is able to easily refer potential grant recipients or loan recipients to the proper doorway to walk through and ask for those dollars. So given the fact that all of this new Treasury guidance came out today, before the May 22nd Council retreat, there will be an analysis made of all of those prioritizations that I just listed to make sure that they all fit within what the Treasury guidance says are appropriate eligible uses of these dollars. I'll just move through these as well. These are 10 or 12 items that relate to this request that the council made for community engagement. The first 3 items are in order and should be completed prior to items 4 through 12. Those 4 through 12, though, could happen in any order or any priority as the council sees fit. But the idea here is, first of all, identifying the needed resources to implement the community engagement plan, including an intern to help run it. identifying the appropriate stakeholders to have involved in the process. And touching on this is where I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Humphreys, because there's already been some conversation had with the community collaboration regarding human services needs. But very quickly also looking at community partners identified within the budget, and then just making sure we understand and can ably explain to the general public or any stakeholders what ARPA is about and what are those items that we would be seeking their input on. So I'm going to pause there and stop sharing and invite Mr. Humphreys to explain the human services conversations that have happened so far.
Yeah, thanks, Tiffany. And I think that this expands beyond even the human services conversations and collaboration. We wanted to just briefly emphasize some context around community engagement that we also included as a note at the top of page 3 and in Tiffany's document in your agenda packet for tonight, that we think will be helpful in making your decisions about this community engagement plan. We think staff have done a good job staying engaged with the community throughout this pandemic, with residents, community leaders, organizations, and businesses. And when we combine that with the fact that what the community has been telling us is not all that different from what they were telling us before the pandemic started, because those existing needs have largely been exacerbated, we end up with a pretty good idea what the needs are. And more importantly, at least some of the community knows we know what the needs are. So we will continue to pay attention and to collaborate to understand how things are changing and where the gaps are, especially as things open up. And the end of the eviction moratorium is going to be a huge wild card. But we think there is an opportunity to build off of our existing ongoing collaboration with the community. And we suspect at least some of the community will expect to hear about or provide feedback on strategies than conversations about what the needs are. And just since you mentioned human services, Tiffany, we had a big listening session in 2019 to understand the needs. We did that again last year at the beginning of the pandemic, and then through the first 6 months of the pandemic to understand the needs. So the kind of motto within human services has been for 2021, don't tell the community we're listening, tell the community we heard you and here's what we're doing about it and why. So just some context that we hope you find helpful.
Thank you, Brian. So I'll continue and finish up this presentation pretty quickly. Or maybe not. Sorry. Apologies. There we go. Okay, so we just discussed the first 3 items there, including the information that has already been collected by the city from community collaboration partners. But once we get through those first 3 items, then there's some ideas here that the council can take or leave or reorganize as it desires. The ideas here, though, are to just continue conversation with local governments throughout this process over the next few years. And this was voiced several times at the March 27th retreat by council members to make sure that the city of Lakewood is not duplicating available resources or dollars available through the state or federal levels, but actually instead to fill the holes and also be a nimble resource identifier for people. So rather than having money provided, for instance, out of Lakewood's own reimbursement or dollars coming from ARPA for rent assistance, it's the ability to take someone who's asking the question or requesting that help, where they can go to most efficiently apply for Pierce County or state or federal dollars for that purpose. Also figuring out where, as that invitation by the county executive and council is also seeking to do, where partnerships would best maximize benefit from the ARPA dollars. Some other ways to reach out to the public: Coffee with the Mayor sessions, the June issue of Lakewood Connections, an online survey, a public open house. And that public open house might turn into a recorded session that anybody could pull up at any time from the website and hear about what ARPA is for and ask for public feedback over a period of time. Utilizing the farmers markets and maybe some summer concert series, an opportunity to have a booth or some information there from the city. And then towards the end of the process, probably have some council study sessions where first there could be information provided to the council as collected through all of these previous outreach efforts just described, but also you may want to have specific in-person conversations, whether it's with a group of like-minded stakeholders or like interested stakeholders, or you just want a single one where you're hearing from a variety of representatives. And then there would be some sort of public hearing process and action on a resolution perhaps that would identify the policies and priorities for expending ARPA funds between now, or incurring the costs between now and 2024. So with that, I will stop and see if there's any questions or thoughts regarding the 2021 ARPA system here that we just heard about from Department of Treasury.
Questions, comments? Mr. Manstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Spear, with respect to the guidance regarding while we can't use the money to replenish reserves, we can use it to replace revenue to the extent that we lost, the revenues declined. Was there a base year specified to determine whether you've lost revenues? I mean, is it 2019 or is it an average of a number of years, or is it against the original 2020 budget?
It is the 2019 budget, the 2019 revenues. That's the base year, and then each year going forward, it's comparing 2021. I'm sorry, 2020, 2021, 22, and 23 against 2019. So as time goes by, there would be that comparison continuing to happen.
So it's 2019 actuals.
Correct.
And once, like say that in 2023, say that in 2022, our actuals return to 2019 levels, then we can't use more funds going forward for that particular purpose.
You would not be able to use funds for 2022 costs if they are not showing any loss of revenue compared to 2019. That is not to say you couldn't use funds in the year 2022 for loss of revenue from previous years, because you have until 2024 to incur those costs and you have till 2026 to spend them.
Okay, well, I'm sure Ms. Kraus is brushing up her calculus to be able to figure that out. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments? Mr. Whalen?
Just making sure that we're doing a little bit of regional planning so we don't have excessive overlap. I think you're on the right track in communication with the other folks, because there is a lot of need out there, but we're throwing a lot of money at the same levels of need for rent assistance and business assistance. So coordinating is going to be the task at hand.
Agreed. Yeah, and as the presentation, and I apologize, it doesn't resemble your council memo very well, because today all this stuff came out, and that's of course after it was circulated to you. But there is billions of dollars at the federal level and then millions of dollars at the county level going to rent, mortgage, and utility assistance. So like you say, Mr. Deputy Mayor, it's a matter of figuring out where best to spend the money rather than duplicating what's already available.
Thank you. Mr. Bulkey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Hey, Tiffany, the number, the 13.8 million number is about $1 million lower than a previous report that I saw. Is that just a difference in methodology, or are we going to see that everywhere?
That is,
are the cities going to get less than they anticipated?
I'm not sure if anybody or any of the jurisdictions that were listed in the identified official allocation documents today from Treasury went up. The initial estimated amount for the city of Lakewood, Washington went down, and it's based on how Treasury calculated things looking at census information, looking at CDBG calculations of need in various geographic areas. So there's a reason behind it, but yes, it did result in about $1 million less that you'll see coming to Lakewood. That number though will not change going forward. That is the official number.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, it's a little bit, wow, that's, I mean,
Yeah.
percentage wise, it's
Hefty.
it's fairly significant. So I'm just wondering if everybody ran into that too.
I
Okay,
think-
thank you.
I think Tacoma's went down too. I saw the Treasury guidance had about 8 or 10 different links to things having to do with the allocation method.
Right.
So it's buried in there somewhere. Just, I'd echo the deputy mayor's comments with respect to the hazards of overlap, and Tiffany, your comments with respect to how much money is already allocated for certain specified needs. But one thing I think we've seen is that there's a kind of a gold rush of service providers and contractors and even other jurisdictions that see big dollar signs and come rushing. And so kind of we can identify a need and people will come and tell us there are needs, and it's undoubtedly they're there, but I think we should go beyond that and ask the folks during this process if they have a need that they're proposing, that it's not just the need, what's your desired outcome? You know, if somebody's hungry, you want them to have a full stomach. If somebody isn't housed, you want them to be housed. But the first thing is, what's the outcome? Is there actually going to be a benefit? Second one is, do the activities that you're suggesting reach those desired outcomes? And I'll use, that there are some things that have no evidence of causal relationship between the activity and the desired outcome. So is there any empirical evidence that what you do will result in that outcome? And the third one is, or fourth one, how do we measure that? And I know in human services, for example, it's sometimes a stretch just to measure activity, let alone outcomes. How many people do you serve? Well, what's that do for the problem? Did you reach your outcome? So asking those questions at a bare minimum causes the proponent to think about and explain the process, and will help us make better decisions, even though some of the measurements are going to be fairly subjective in the end. So, it's a lot of money. So thanks for your hard work and sorting it out. You're going to have to join Jeff Gum as the master of federal compliance red tape.
Yes. And from what I understand, the council intends to continue its discussion of ARPA dollars on May 22nd at that retreat. So as was mentioned in the presentation, there'll be updated information coming to you on that day.
Great. Thank you much. And we now move to Pierce County Council Ad Hoc Committee to End Homelessness Action Plan Update with Ms. Spear.
Thank you once again. This is an effort that was happening at lightning speed over the last 5 to 6 weeks. And we are now at a point where the first phase of it is done, and we're about to enter phase 2, which is a 4 or 5 month process to create a second document that the county council has requested. But we wanted to get this in front of you now because this is something that the city of Lakewood is a named member of this ad hoc committee. And so providing you a progress update now, I think will be valuable to you. So once again, I'll share screen. And that's not the right one. Apologies. There we go. So back in March, there was a resolution passed that was attached in your documents this evening for your meeting packet, which had created an ad hoc committee of about 10 members. And again, City of Lakewood was a named member. And it was to create an action plan, which was in turn supposed to recommend how to create a comprehensive plan to end homelessness. So this was a group put together and asked within a 4-week period to create a comprehensive plan regarding ending homelessness. And that comprehensive plan is due to the County Council by September 24th of this year. The second piece of what this ad hoc committee was asked to do was to recommend how Pierce County, or Greater Pierce County, meaning including the cities, can work with partners to end street homelessness by November 1st of this year. So this isn't by November 1, there are no homeless people anymore. This is by November 1 of this year, there are no people forced to be on the street because there is inadequate shelter. So there were two pretty aggressive requests within this resolution, and we've got to the point where the first piece is now completed. Sorry. These are the members of the folks. So Human Services and the Director of Human Services actually acted as the facilitator. The Continuum of Care had several representatives. The Coalition to End Homelessness did as well. And then the cities of Tacoma, Lakewood, and Puyallup were all part of the group. The action plan, which is, again is County Council, this is what we recommend to you about how to create this comprehensive plan to end homelessness within the next 6 months that you would then take however many years to implement. And also, County Council, these are the recommendations regarding how to end street homelessness by November 1st of this year. So there's the action plan itself was again attached in the information for you this evening. But in summary, it includes a history of plans and efforts in the past, in the recent past for the county regarding homelessness. It covers goals, definitions, and principles within the action plan, recommendations regarding the scope of that comprehensive plan, what groups or experts to include, including those with lived experience, how to engage the public in this process. And then it also includes information and recommendations about creating the shelter needed by November 1 of this year to satisfy that second part of the resolution the council adopted. The guiding principles, focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, talking about experts, as I mentioned, who have lived an unsheltered experience of whatever kind, doing this regionally, using best practices and published information that's available, and making sure that the steering committee creating this comprehensive plan reflects the population served, meaning diverse and reflective of who suffers from homelessness within the county area. Public engagement, doing it as much as possible, ensuring diversity as well in that outreach, trying to reach a variety of populations to make sure that it is an equitable representation of the feedback. There needs to be a core staff team at Pierce County Human Services to help implement. And the way to craft this comprehensive plan over the next few months is to use that ad hoc committee and perhaps expand it in order to move ahead with hitting the ground running. So to create this comprehensive plan, it's to form the group this month, convene the steering committee, move forward, June and July, starting the plan development and also engage in community outreach. August, there's a final draft plan for review. There's outreach to jurisdictions and to the public in September and October. And then by November, there is this comprehensive plan delivered to the county council. Regarding sheltering everyone off of street homelessness by November 1st, again, there was a recommendation provided. It is separate and apart from creating the comprehensive plan, but of course related. The timeline for this is again to convene a work group very quickly to present a draft plan and seek community input in June. July, you're finalizing the shelter plan and identifying funding sources, implementing in August through October, and then in November, you're ensuring that all of the things are in place. So as time goes forward into this coming winter, this actually stands the test of time. So the council received this recommendation last week at the Human Services Committee. And the recommendations were to accept the action plan and to allow the ad hoc committee to continue moving forward as a steering committee for the comprehensive plan. And then it identified about $250,000 for FTEs, engagement contract, and marketing and meetings to the public. And then a request for clarifying how the shelter plan should be budgeted. What are the parameters for that effort? The next steps is a resolution number has been identified, but there's no meat to it yet. But it's intended that the council will start to take a look at the recommendations provided last week in later May for action to accept the action plan and let loose this ad hoc committee to continue on to the next step. So unless there's any questions, I had one other item related to this. It's confusing.
Okay, next.
Glad you can solve the world's problems in 4 weeks. That'll be great.
I think we need to recognize this was a political initiative, which itself was not grounded in any research or feasibility study.
But just so you know, the city is a named member of both the action plan group and the comprehensive plan group. So we will continue to bring you updates. And should you have any direction to me as the staff representative of the city, please let me know and we'll just keep you apprised as the months proceed.
Yeah, I think that there is an ongoing effort to expand the committee, the group, to include a broader membership than focusing on the providers. The continuum of care is, in the opinion of many, a dysfunctional entity. I think that's been the City of Lakewood's experience, and I think it's been the Pierce County Human Services experience. So you don't want to just default to the same old and get a Seattle solution. So I think it's valuable for Lakewood to participate in that broader committee. Mr. Branstetter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear your comments about expanding the group that's thinking around this to beyond primarily service providers and government funders of service providers. Ms. Spear, I'm looking at page 97 of the packet, which is page 13 of the thing over there, and it's under project timelines. And in there, it says elected officials in partner jurisdictions will need time to review and formally adopt, vote on the action plan and the comprehensive plan. So do I interpret that this council at some point in time is going to have to approve the comprehensive plan in the manner of like an interlocal agreement, or what really is this council going to have to approve?
I couldn't tell you that yet. It's not clear whether it's going to be some sort of interlocal or intergovernmental agreement to have this thing ratified, or if it's going to be some sort of thumbs up, thumbs down, and the county council does the adopting. I'm not sure yet. It's not clear yet.
I see. And in the discussion around staffing, there was a discussion about a facilitator and then a project manager. And it spoke to that the facilitator should be someone whose expertise is in communications with perhaps some awareness about dealing with homelessness. And then later it says, but the facilitator could also be the project manager. And I'm trying to think about why to have the person that would be leading this project be primarily a communications person, as opposed to someone with some expertise in homelessness prevention or work. What was are we just saying they could be the same person to save money?
That could be, or it could be who they find as the project manager if that is within their skill set. The intention of the facilitator going forward is because there are probably within the group that will end up being on that committee some pretty strongly held opinions and varying views. And they will need a facilitator who is very capable of hearing all of those views and helping bring the group together to either consensus or thumbs up, thumbs down majority, or whatever the way it will be to move forward. But those skills will be very important. And that may or may not be the same individual as a project manager who is then dealing with the implementation of the comprehensive plan going forward.
Okay, and I guess my other question is, what did the committee decide the definition of end homelessness is?
That is not defined anywhere. The resolution is very brief in the way it describes it. It's a single sentence and it says, will comprehensive plan to end homelessness. And part of the confusion, for instance, with the continuum of care representatives is there is an existing strategic plan for the continuum to end homelessness in place already. It's a 5-year strategic plan. And so whether this is taking that and running with it or updating it, or whether it's creating a completely different document was unclear per the resolution. So that'll be part of what the committee needs to handle from the get-go.
Okay, well, I look forward to updates. Thank you.
Sure.
Anything further, Tiffany?
Yes, very briefly, there's one more homelessness related issue to bring to your attention, and that is SHAPE. This has come to you very recently, a couple of different times, but this is the group titled South Sound Housing Affordability Partners. And as you'll recall, just within a few weeks ago, the council was asked to take a look at a letter that was then submitted to the SHAPE Executive Board, or Steering Committee, I should say, questioning the intergovernmental agreement that's pending for the SHAPE group. And they have now taken that to the executive or steering committee level and asked some questions and are intending to talk about it at the full SHAPE group this week. And I think we'll get some sort of response coming back to the Lakewood City Council following that meeting. But in the meantime, this was also a presentation made to the Pierce County Cities and Towns Association this last week. And at that meeting, it was expressed that the idea in the SHAPE steering committee mind at this point is that the intergovernmental changes and updates would be completed by the end of May, and the request will be made of cities to decide whether to join SHAPE within the month of June. I'm not going to go through all of this, obviously, given time, but to remember, SHAPE started a few years ago within the Mayor's Roundtable, and it's moved forward into this potential creation of a permanent group that would look at regional solutions to affordable housing and homeless issues. They have used ARCH, the Snohomish AHA, and South King County SKIP group as models on which to base SHAPE. What it might do, helping people stay in existing homes, accelerating access to additional affordable or attainable housing units, potentially create a regional housing capital fund to create new units, and having housing action plan best practices, et cetera, for smaller jurisdictions, for instance, who may not have the ability to create their own. Also looking at potentially advocating on behalf of all Pierce County participating jurisdictions at the state or federal level regarding housing issues. One thing that was tried to be made very clear is that this is not intended to usurp any local government's land use authority, to duplicate work being done by other agencies such as PCRC or PSRC, or being another layer of bureaucracy. Where it sits, as I mentioned, is there's a number of jurisdictions that are looking at this. You see the ones that are not dotted. So Auburn, Lakewood, Puyallup, Edgewood, the Puyallup Tribe, Sumner, Fife, Ording, Tacoma, Gig Harbor, and Pierce County are the 10 jurisdictions that have been actively discussing possibly joining SHAPE. The next step is the presentations that have been made, including the one this last Thursday to Pierce County cities and towns, deciding if any edits need to be made to the intergovernmental agreement, and then by the end of June, deciding whether jurisdictions will be signing on. So the specifics within the agreement was already discussed with this council. I won't repeat myself, but there were some questions, if you recall, that the city of Lakewood submitted, which was allowing for every 2 years an automatic, rather than just a renewal of the interlocal agreement, having every jurisdiction take a look at it again to decide if the group is still operating as it should, and if it is meeting its budget needs, and if it is also finishing work plan items on time. Secondly, does there need to be a certain minimum number of jurisdictions involved to represent the county geographically, not just the population centers of Tacoma, Lakewood, UP, and the county unincorporated area? And the financial commitment based on the number of jurisdictions that ultimately join will dictate how much each jurisdiction would need to pay, in addition to its population. So I couldn't really tell you right now what the financial commitment would be for Lakewood until we get an updated version of a potential budget. But the idea at this point is to support 1.5 FTEs, an executive manager or director, and then a support staff person as well. So when the steering committee for SHAPE took a look at the county's letter, there were a couple of questions put to me. I answered them with responses that came from the letter that you approved. They did respond in a somewhat positive way, actually, to several of Lakewood's requests. So talking about how to make sure that you do have geographic representation in SHAPE, but not necessarily having the 14 minimum members mentioned in Lakewood's letter. Also talking about, yes, the steering committee has put in the draft IGA that the executive board would be looking at that agreement every 5 years, but maybe per the Lakewood's request, there would be this explicit review of the adequacy of the budget of the organization, as well as how well the work plan is being satisfied. And the way it was left the day of the steering committee meeting was elected officials may, and they may have already done this, be reaching out to Lakewood City Council members to ask more feedback from you as individuals, and also try to seek some additional detail as to where the city of Lakewood may go with its decision to join or not. So with that, once more, I'll stop sharing and answer any questions that you may have.
Mr. Branstetter.
Mike, I'm good, Mayor. Excuse me.
Mr. Whalen.
Thanks, Ms. Spear. On the first topic today on the county council resolution, is that a topic, do you believe, that could be subsumed in the work plan of SHAPE down the road? A policy issue within the housing context, not the, but a policy issue. But in an effort to try to avoid overlap, one wonders, right?
Agreed. It is confusing at this point because SHAPE continues to be talked about as a voluntary group, meaning you may have half or less of the jurisdictions involved with that group, but it may be asked to take on countywide issues over time. And so that's something that SHAPE itself, as well as county council with these types of resolutions, is going to need to figure out.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Ms. Spear.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate the update as always. And now move to reports by the city manager, Mr. Caulfield. You're the center square on my screen.
All right. I'm usually up in the corner on mine. Well, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and council members. Actually, just a couple of updates this evening I'd like to share. The first is in the realm of economic development. I just wanted to let you know that things have really not slowed down here in the city of Lakewood after a tremendous banner year in 2020, which coincided with a pandemic. And one, of course, would not expect that to be the case. But really just some quick kind of updates here. In terms of building permits that have been recently issued on the commercial side, there's been 15. 15 have been issued, mostly in the area, actually a wide range of areas, restaurants, entertainment, the list goes on. On the industrial side, there's currently 5 projects that are moving forward that were recently permitted, and they total 994,000 square feet of new industrial and manufacturing floor space here in Lakewood. In the multifamily realm, there's 2 projects that have been permitted and that are moving forward, and they total 102 new units coming to Lakewood. On the residential side, specifically on the single family residential side, there's 23 projects that are moving forward, and they encompass 107 new lots. And again, this is not how things used to be in Lakewood. And one of the reasons was that, particularly on the residential side, whether it was multifamily or single family, there was this issue of, well, the city is built out. Well, that may be true, but we're seeing more difficult properties being developed because folks are getting creative and being able to move forward with these initiatives. And then on top of that, just in terms of code changes, either at the local level, at the state level, are allowing these types of initiatives to move forward as well. In addition, 25 new businesses have come into Lakewood in about the last 8 months or so, which again is pretty phenomenal. And then is right now in the queue, and again, I'm going to start with new housing, multifamily. There are 15 projects that are moving through the process in one shape, form, or another, totaling another 381 housing units. So again, pretty phenomenal there. In addition, there's 3 mixed use development projects that have been proposed, and those 3 projects would bring an additional 429 new housing units. And by the way, that doesn't include Lakewood Landing, which is looking at bringing forward, upwards of, I think it's about 700 new units. On the commercial side, 15 new projects in the queue. Building permits haven't been issued, but again, going through the current process, mostly in the area of restaurants and entertainment, as well as some hospitality businesses as well. And then getting back to industrial and manufacturing, as I mentioned, there's 5 projects coming out of the ground right now with, totaling 994,000 square feet. Well, there's another eight totaling 930,000 square feet that are currently going through the permitting process. And, that's really a reflection of the demand for that type of space here in the South Sound, given the lack of availability either down in the port or in Kent or Sumner or other places. And so Lakewood is beneficially positioned to be able to take advantage of that. And again, as you've heard me say before, this does not happen by accident. This goes back a number of years and starts with the mayor and the council and the public policies that you have put in place to make economic development a priority and to attract this investment. And the dividends are just simply now being paid today. And so long as you stay course on that, they will continue. These types of initiatives and investments will continue here in Lakewood. Switching gears, earlier this year, you might remember I came forward with a request from Waste Connections. They had a fundraising opportunity in support of Mary Bridge Children's Hospital, where individuals could buy a special purple refuse cart, and the proceeds of that acquisition would go to Mary Bridge Children's Hospital. Waste Connections, their service area encompasses the whole county with the exception of Tacoma, University Place, and Faircrest. They did pass on to us that since they kicked this program off, they had kind of a soft opening in February, and then they kind of went full focus in the March time period. So they've sold a total of 161 carts, and they've raised over $32,000. They once again reached out to us to see if the Lakewood City Council would be interested in allowing this here in Lakewood. If you recall, Previously, the Lakewood City Council, some of your comments and feedback was, well, if you do it for one nonprofit, where does it stop? You got to do it for all nonprofits. And then the issue of confusion between, what bins people are supposed to use if you introduce another colored bin to the makeup there. As I also pointed out, if this was something that the council did want to move forward with, even though our franchise agreement doesn't allow for it, certainly we could do something via some kind of a one-page memorandum of understanding or agreement or something like this to accommodate that. And the reason being is because, again, our franchise is very, very specific in terms of the types of carts, the use of carts, the sizes, the colors, et cetera. But again, if this is something the council wanted to do, we could certainly make it happen. I did let Waste Connections know that I would pass this information on to you. A representative of the company might come to a future city council meeting as part of public comment to address you directly on that. So I just wanted to pass that on to you as well. And then lastly, from a calendar event, we have our SSMCP, South Sound Military and Communities Partnership Elected Officials Council is this Thursday morning. It's a virtual event, kicks off at 8 a.m. It's 8 to 9:30 a.m. And I know several of you have signed up for that. If any others are interested in attending, please let myself or the city clerk know, and we'll get you registered for that. We're hoping that the second, there's two of these each year. There's one in May, and then there's another one in November. And we're cautiously optimistic that perhaps the one in November we can be back in person and be able to have some relationships there. So, Mayor, that's my report for this evening.
Any questions for Mr. Caulfield, who has demanded that we have virtual biscuits and gravy at the SSMCP? Seeing none, we'll go to council comments. Mr. Brandstetter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This week I'm going to attend the inaugural meeting of a task force that's going to review the formulas and fees that South Sound 911 charges police departments for record management, firearms permitting, and others. This is a committee that's going to review looking at what might be put in effect for 2023 in terms of doing that, and it potentially impacts our annual costs for those fees that we contract with South Sound 911 for. I completed Miss Kelly Fong's survey regarding our retreat on May 22nd. I appreciate her sending it out and then doing some tweaks to it to be able to go and do that. But I was surprised at the content of the survey because my recollection of when we discussed setting that date, it was to set a date for a retreat that was going to be primarily, if not exclusively, around diversity, equity, and inclusion issues, so that we could have not so formal a facilitated decision-making discussion, because we don't know what we don't know, but to really talk about to what extent and how do we want to go after this issue. And then this evening, I heard that we're going to devote a significant portion of the retreat, or at least a portion of the retreat, to rush into discussing specifics about the use of ARPA money, even though we don't necessarily have a need to do that. So I guess, Mr. Mayor, I'm really trying to understand what really are we going to do on May 22nd. And you know, are we going to be pushing the diversity, equity, inclusion issue down the road to where we're not going to have that full, robust discussion where we can really provide some real guidance to ourselves about how we're going to move forward?
I don't recall there ever being a consensus that we'd have the entire retreat devoted to DEI issues. I recall it being a consensus that there would be a significant discussion with respect to DEI issues. Somebody can correct me if my recollection's incorrect.
I thought it was to be a continuation of our goal setting from the last retreat, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And to the extent that DEI obviously is an important policy consideration, given our statement on equity recently, I think it can be part and parcel, but I didn't think it was the entirety of the weekend. That was my impression.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong.
Well, I just saying that I had heard it differently, and so you know, there's a range of things that there's always a range of things that need to be talked about. I'm just wouldn't want to repeat where it was at the end of the agenda, and thus we just ran out of time to do the topic justice.
Understood.
I agree. I think there will be a need for some significant time to be dedicated to the DEI issue. So maybe we could tackle it first.
Anyway, those are all my comments, Mr. Mayor.
We'll tell you, I talked to Ms. Kelly Flung about ordering it so it isn't last, but also there may be a flow to the conversation so that it has one place that's more appropriate than another. I'll leave that to the facilitator as to the order, except indicating that you probably don't want it last. You want to make sure there's a block of time for it. But my recollection is the same as Mr. Whalen's. I recall there may have been a suggestion that we have an entire conversation devoted to DEI, but I never recall that being a consensus of the council that that would take over the entire agenda.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good.
Mr. Volkey.
I'm good.
Ms. Farmer.
The governor signed Senate Bill 5163 into law today. That's the culmination of the work that the Sex Offender Policy Board did last year on increasing access and some other issues around release when it's deemed necessary for sex offenders to be released back into the community. So good news there.
Ms. Bell.
I'm good, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Whalen.
Thank you. This is going on my 6th hour on Zoom since 4 o'clock this afternoon. So the recap started with the Pierce Transit Commission. They reviewed the results of a survey, which was putting a toe in the water and testing the temperature of the public's appetite for the 0.3% potential tax that they're authorized to go up to. As communicated in the meeting today, the survey results were not necessarily uber favorable for a tax increase, but the commission is looking to put it on the ballot for November, not August, to give some time for more public feedback and education. So we were asked to go back to our respective jurisdictions and kind of get a sense for how the jurisdiction may want to either get more information, to make some sort of a decision whether they would down the road support a resolution for it or not. But there's more information to follow on that, and I'll provide you what I can when I get it, but just want to give you an update. Then I went to the Pierce, or the Clover Park School District, made the board report there on behalf of the council, and it was favorably received. And I spent 3 hours last Friday on I-5 after talking to the city manager. I was one of those unlucky devils who was in a car for 3 hours from Lakewood to downtown. So I'm thankful that we're doing I-5 JBLM improvements, at least on the south side. Hopefully someday we'll get north. That's all I have. It was a fun day.
I was fortunate enough to get off 72nd Street.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's a busy day. I have Coffee with the Mayor at 7:30. You're all welcome to come. And an actual in-person event. The 7th Infantry Division's having a change of command tomorrow. And they're having a limited COVID conscious attendance. So it will hopefully be a sunny day and be a real change of pace. Anything further to come before the council? Seeing none, see you next Monday. We're adjourned.